In our increasingly electrified society, that's where a resilient grid matters most. ITC Great Plains is ensuring the greater grid can meet our energy needs now and long into the future. Learn more at itc-holdings.com.
Good evening and welcome to the Kansas Legislature live from Smoky Hills Public Television right here in Bunker Hill. I'm your moderator this evening, Becky Kaiser. I am an employee of Eagle Communications Hayes Radio, and I am also a policy fellow with the Fort Hays State University Docking Institute. We want to thank them for participating and helping support the show along with our sponsor, ITC Great Plains. We have a great panel with us this evening who are here to talk about another busy week in Topeka. But before we get started, we want to remind you that this is your opportunity to talk to the legislators, ask them questions. Maybe you have a concern that you'd like to voice, you can call toll free. That number is 1-800-337-4788. Let's meet our panelists this evening. We want to start with someone who's very familiar to us all, Representative Troy Waymaster from right here in Bunker Hill with the 109th District. And sitting closest to me is Senator John Dahl. He is from Garden City with the 39th District. And then in the middle this evening, we also have joining us Senator Elaine Bowers, who is from the 36th District in Concordia. So Troy, I'm going to ask everybody to do this, but let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about the committees that you're on. What keeps you busy in Topeka?
Oh, there's a lot of things that keep me busy. I'm the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, which is the budget committee for the House of Representatives. And so we've been spending about the last 3 weeks going through some of the budgets for the state agencies and departments. And, you know, Senator Bowers and I were just talking because today we had a committee that lasted 4.5 hours long because we were trying to get caught up. Due to those other topics that we were discussing this week, we got a little behind, and so we had committee today to get all those discussed and those recommendations from the budget committees, and we'll be doing that until March 10th, going through all the budgets for the state. I'm also the chairperson of the advisory panel for the SPARK committee, or that's the Strengthening People and Revitalizing Kansas, and so I'm the chair of the advisory panel for modernization and efficiency. And we actually had our first meeting going through all the submissions that we received to the SPARK committee, which all of the advisory panels combined, there was over 760 applications that was received because the deadline was February 16th. And so they worked diligently for our meeting yesterday, and they went through all of the submissions that would be pertinent to the Modernization and Efficiency Committee, and we have 140 requests that we're going to be going through and analyzing with the American Rescue Plan Act money that we received from the federal government. So it's been very, very busy this week.
Well, so what makes something pertinent to, as far as you're concerned?
Well, we received some information from the Council of State Governments, which is a national entity that assists us in state government. And I was looking through what other states had utilized those funds for. And to be quite honest, it's pretty broad, and some of the states were pretty creative in using those funds. And so we were looking at some of the applications that were received when the deadline was February 16th. Some of those were from cities who want to build a new city hall. Some of those was modernization of our technology throughout the state. Some of that was also like a lot of police, sheriff, and fire departments. They have to have federal designation on their radios, and so a lot of them were asking for that. So it varies quite a bit of what people would be submitting for, and you could submit an application for any reason. It's going to be the advisory panels that are going to go through the process and say whether or not it is pertinent to the ARPA funds that we receive from Congress.
Let's move on now to Senator John Dahl from Garden City. Tell us a little bit about your committee work, John.
Well, I have ag, have local government, what she chairs, and have utilities, commerce, and juvenile justice. But, you know, and mine are just pretty cut and dry. She can go over local government. I'm just kind of a spoke in the wheel.
Okay, okay. Well, let's go to Senator Bowers and tell us a little bit about your committee
And
work,
just
Elaine.
like John, too, I have 4 committees, and mine begins at 8:30 with transportation, which is perfect in my real world. I'm an auto dealer in north central Kansas, so perfect place for me to be. Ethics, transparency, and local government that John sits on with me, too, and then judiciary, which is a really fascinating committee. That's an hour and a half, where our other committees are an hour. And then finally utilities before we go to the floor at 2:30.
Busy day.
It is very busy. Our days go fast.
I
They
bet
certainly
so.
do.
Well, I wanted to start this evening, again, a reminder that if you would like to ask the legislators a question, please give us a call. It's toll-free, 1-800-337-4788. Wanted to start, Troy, with you and Elaine, because you have been very involved, both of you, about the assistance for people who were affected by,
Yes.
in this area, called the Four Counties Fire, and it was actually a little bit bigger than that on December 15th. There is some relief coming?
Yes. And actually, the White House today announced that they are designating that as a federal disaster. So we got that information this morning. And actually, I got that when I was in committee, and I shared that with Representative Rogers, because he represents Ellis and Rooks County, the
Right.
2 areas in his district that were affected. And so early on, Elaine and I did a tour of the devastation 2 days after the fire had happened. And we toured the burnt land, the dead cattle, the burnt homes. It was worse than I had imagined. So we were talking that day about legislation that we've had in the past, where if it had your fence that was destroyed by a wildfire, then the state would make that sales tax exempt. And so early on, we pre-filed that bill in the House, and then Senator Bowers did in the Senate. And then we were hoping that they would get this passed out pretty quickly. But when you're talking about sales tax initiatives, it's germane to other sales tax provisions. And so that is probably one reason why it's been slowed. The Senate did pass their version out of the Senate, and it came over to the House. The House Tax Committee passed our version, and it was sent to the House floor. But then this week, they worked the Senate bill and put in the House language, which is starkly different than what was in the Senate version. But I could have Senator Bowers talk about what the Senate had put into their bill in regards to the sales tax exemption for fencing.
And our intent was to have the same bill in the same chamber to move quickly. But our Senate Tax Committee did make some changes, and one, it was exciting for farmers and ranchers across the state. There would be no sales tax on fencing at all, not just with the disaster. So it was modified when there were several other amendments put on there, and it passed out of the Senate 35-0. And that was within our first week that we were there. And Troy and I both testified on our Senate side and House side about this as well. I think one of the remarkable things is the people that we were with. That was they were very moving, and Paradise with the church with all sorts of donations and food and water, so much water you couldn't believe. But other things that you don't think about, like dog food and cat sand. Those are just some items that I never realized was a staple of a household that you would need in an emergency. So watching everyone pull together, and we had all of us co-sponsored the bills, and then the tax chairman on each side. So we felt very comfortable with that. And the other thing that Troy and I didn't want to see was this to expire, because the other bills after the incident, they would expire. So you have to have a new bill every time there's a disaster like this. And here we were off session, and we couldn't help the folks at home who needed this. The bill is retroactive, so we've told all of our people to save the receipts, because the Department of Revenue is ready to go. And I might mention one more thing of what the Department of Revenue and the Department of Vital Statistics did. A lot of people in their homes lost their fireboxes that had birth certificates, their car titles. And you know, farmers don't just have a truck title and a car title, they have trailers, all sorts of ATVs. And so they replaced those all for free for them. And they reached out to them to take care of those, something minor that you don't think you're going to need, and then you need your birth certificate and you don't have it, and no charge. And I thought that was a nice touch that our agencies did.
You know, Troy, you talked about houses burning, I mean, completely, and that just takes everything away from me. I don't know if anybody's ever prepared for how to come back from that.
And I do have to say, the insurance commissioner, Vicki Schmidt,
Yes.
she came out here as well, and she has directed her office to handle all of the insurance claims, and if there's any issues with the insurance companies, because the insurance companies were asking questions like, okay, did your house really burn? And
identify what you
she's,
lost.
her office is intervening and saying, this is a disaster area, just pay the claims.
And also, the Ag Secretary, Mike Bean, came. The governor came out one evening. We watched the federal agencies get together at a big event to make sure to teach the farmers and ranchers all the paperwork that they would need to do. It's been a big effort.
What's been frustrating is that the relief and the assistance that the individuals that were affected are wanting is not really something the state can do. This is the sales tax exemption on the fencing equipment, the state can do that. Most of it is all federal. And so that's why that federal designation today was so critical in regards to the wildfires in December.
And I noticed in our newsroom with Hayes Post and Eagle Radio today, we did get a news release from the offices of the Kansas congressional representatives, and they did talk about how happy they were that this had happened and why they were supporting it and how important that it is to, well, not just this area, but all of Kansas, and actually beyond that to a certain degree. One thing that I had never thought about, as you mentioned, the cattle that were killed, a lot of people had built up this herd of specific genetics, and it's gone, and you know, that's their livelihood, and it does affect other people. I'd never thought about that.
Like 50 years of work is just wiped out in one afternoon. And I do have to give a shout out to Senator Carolyn McGinn. A few days after the fire, she reached out to me, and she is the chairperson of Council of State Governments Midwest, and
CSC.
she was doing an outreach to all of the states that are in the Midwest region for assistance to help out with the fires. And obviously we've seen all the hay bales that were trucked in and donated for those ranchers that lost everything. It was just devastating.
And watching the FFA kids come together too to organize from their communities to bring this. We also should mention the congressional folks came out, but as well as the Attorney General. So people did know that they were getting proper state attention as well as federal.
Does anybody know how much it costs per mile to build a fence? What are we talking about? I understand it's kind of expensive.
About 15,000?
But we had that in testimony too.
Some were saying
10 to
that the
15.
cost could be up to 20,000, but I think 15 is it. But then
Per
again,
mile?
yeah. But then again, prices have gone up with
Yeah, oh, that's
inflation.
true.
So
And
that
short
figure probably went
supplies.
up.
Yes.
And we're short supplies.
True. Well, we want to go to the phones now. We have our first caller for the evening. We have Melissa on the line from Andover. Melissa, what is your question this evening of our legislators?
Yes, ma'am. My question would be of each of the panelists, what are the biggest concerns from the area, the Kansans that are talking to you, average Kansans? And secondly, how would you address that concern?
What are you hearing from the Kansans in your area, John? What are people concerned about?
Well, in the education world, we have 3 bills that are very damaging, in my opinion, to public schools. So I'm hearing from lots of teachers on that aspect. The congressional map, you heard a lot on the congressional map, and how the state legislature map's going to turn out for House and Senate seats. So, you know, those are 3 that you hear about a lot, but I would say overwhelmingly it's teachers.
So tell us about that. There's quite a bit of activity and discussion this week.
Yeah, one of the things they want to do is they want to have teachers make lesson plans available online for a complete year, which is totally unrealistic. It's impossible. For example, when I was teaching government, and this is how old I am, I can remember when Ronald Reagan was shot. And we went immediately to, I think it's Amendment 22 or whatever, presidential succession.
Right.
Instead of where we were at, because it was fresh on the kids' minds. And so we could do that. There's plenty of examples of that when you go into, if you're teaching history and all of a sudden, you know, you have action going on in the Ukraine, or you go into action into the Middle East, you want to go back to that type of history, regardless of what's on the book, what's in the book, where you're at on the book, that's what the news is. So when you're a good teacher is very innovative, and they're killing that innovation. Another one they're doing is they want the money to follow the student, which maybe that's good for Johnson County or Wichita. We don't have a lot of private schools out here, or the home schools where it should, you know, I think it's opening up to a lot of fraud, such. Obviously, I don't like the bills, but I can go on and on, but I don't want to.
Well, okay, and people may have heard this referred to as Parents' Bill of Rights, but I will point out that, and in fact, I understand there was some testimony about this, that a lot of lesson plans are on the internet for the students, and their parents usually or often can see that as well. So there is that in there in this day and age, thanks to the internet. But as I understand it, people are kind of wanting to, at least in this bill, kind of influence what kind of information is in these lesson plans.
You know, I taught and coached for a long time. And what I like to tell people is when I was coaching, if my players only played during season, just shot baskets during season, or worked on their game during season, they weren't going to play during season if they didn't play in the off season. It's the same with teaching and kids learning. You know, they sit there, what are you learning? You need to sit down with your kid when he comes home from school and talk to him and have conversation with them, you know, and readers make leaders. So, you know, kids need to be reading. And so when they're throwing it all back onto the teachers, I'm pretty offended by that. I mean, if you don't ask your kid when he gets home what he did that day, I question you. I question whether that's a good home life or not.
I like that, readers make leaders. That's great. So you're saying that the parents should
They
make
need
an
to step
effort
up
to
too,
be,
yeah. I mean, the teachers need, if they're raising a kid, they said takes a whole community. Education takes parents, it takes teachers, you know, and to throw it all on the teacher when the kid's coming home and saying that, you know, they're getting taught this and you don't know it until the end of the semester, that's on the parent, in my opinion.
We have another caller on the line that we would like to visit with, Paul from Delphos. Paul, tell us what you're interested in this evening. Do we have Paul from Delphos?
Yes.
Please, go ahead. What's your question of the legislators this evening?
Yes, the question I have is, we're a small community and many small communities around, and yes, it is. Yes, we have, you know, I'm in a small community and we have a lot of small communities around. We don't have the tax base that we can get grants for our streets. Many little small towns, even around the state, are suffering the same thing. The funds are not there. Is there anything out there, you know, when you're looking at 6 blocks or 5 blocks to be overlaid, you're looking at $160,000. And is there anything out there that is different than just the funding that is? That would, you know, because we don't have the matching funds. These little towns don't have the matching funds for grants. What can we do? Anything?
Good question. Elaine.
Well, Paul, I'm Plumber Haley's daughter from Delphos, Elaine Haley Bowers, and graduated from Minneapolis High School. So I'm happy to hear Delphos. You know, I also think we have a great little town with our Grace Bedell Monument in the middle of the square, the little 10-year-old girl who wrote to Abraham Lincoln to grow a beard. So she'd be more attracted to women that they would convince their husbands and brothers and uncles to vote for Abraham Lincoln. And he wrote her back. So I think that's a wonderful story, and we can play tribute to that there in Delphos. But Paul, we do have the Department of Commerce, and it's the community block grants that we can help you with. And a new line will be opening up, and I'm happy if you call me in my office to help get Delphus started on that and work with our city clerk, Karen. And I believe there are grants out there, and I've wrote a lot of letters for streets and sewer projects in Senate District 36. In fact, we were awarded 10 grants just this last week in Senate District 36. So that's one avenue, Paul, and I'm happy to help work with you on that personally.
I was going to say, a small town in Rush County that I represent, Timken, was one of those cities that received a community block grant, and I believe that was for water and their sewage. And so, yeah, that's the best way for smaller communities to reach out to the Department of Commerce and apply for those community block grants. But I think we need to have the conversation about rural economic development as a whole. And I know that's been a conversation that's been very important to me because I represent a very rural part of the state. And I mean, the largest town I have is Russell, and that's 4,500. And I have 7 counties. So rural economic development is very important to me. And we tend to focus, especially this year, there was a lot of focus on the Apex bill, which is going to be something that is not going to benefit rural Kansas.
Remind us what that is again, Troy.
That was the package that we put together for these very large companies to move into the state of Kansas, bringing in thousands of jobs. And there were certain parameters in there that the state could offer those companies that are wanting to look at Kansas. Because I think the Secretary of Commerce even said we had 11 potential businesses that were looking to come into the Kansas, but we didn't have anything that was attractive like that as far as an incentive package. And that's why they wanted to put this together. So we've been trying to work on rural economic development. I know we've been working on the House side about housing and having a revolving loan fund with the Kansas Housing Resource Center that would be targeted specifically for rural areas of the state. Because housing is a concern, jobs are a concern, getting people back into the rural parts of Kansas is a main concern. We can talk about the rural opportunity zones. That was implemented in 2011 by Governor Brownback. They work in some counties, they don't work in others. And that's a program that has some successes, but some counties haven't seen any benefit from that either. But we definitely need to have a larger conversation about rural economic development.
Is there a specific definition of rural Kansas, population-wise or otherwise?
There is, and some would, and I even question that definition, because with the rural opportunity zones, we keep increasing the population, so now it's any county less than 40,000. In some places, I mean, that would be rural, but I'm more concerned about the counties that maybe have a population of 3,000. And they're the ones that need assistance the most in trying to generate workforce and jobs.
You mentioned this, talking about rural Kansas and some of the concerns, getting people to stay here, to move back, housing. I know that the city of Hayes has been talking about this in Ellis County for quite some time. Another issue that comes up, and they're hoping that there will be some state assistance or at least representation about this problem, is daycare for, most parents are working. There are single parents who certainly need help, and there are not that many daycare providers anymore, apparently because the regulations are just crazy, and they are not able to pay very well. They're not able to provide insurance. Is there anything the state can do, John, on something like that? Can they get involved?
And you hit the nail on the head. The 3 things I hear most for them is for rural towns, even sized towns, Garden City where I live, daycare, housing, and single parent homes. We have such strict regulations, but a lot of them are federal also, those regulations. And so I think we have to work with our federal delegation and state delegations, because we have a big Nazarene church that's beautiful. It's brand new for the most part. They've been wanting to have a daycare there since they've been built. And every time they hit a stop sign, not enough water fountains, not enough bathrooms, not enough, they can't pass an inspection. And this place is you know, I'd love to have my kid go there, even though he's 30, but he's probably still needs a daycare.
That makes me think, I know this morning there was discussion on one of our radio programs with the director of Grow Hayes, and they were talking about this exact issue. There's hope that a specific senior housing center will become developed, and you know, is that an opportunity to bring those two groups together? Good place for retirees to come, for seniors to be involved. Can they not work somehow with the little ones? And I don't know if there are any rules and regs against that, but that was one suggestion.
When I was looking into this over the summer, because in the western part of the district, I was getting calls on this, and the Department of Commerce realized the importance of working with the Department of Children and Family. So the two agencies working together to solve this problem is also happening behind the scenes too, so that they both understand from their point of view what's happening in rural Kansas with daycare.
Good, that's good to know.
And I'm assuming that some of those applications that I was talking about for the Spark Committee and the Economic Development Advisory Panel, there have been submissions for daycare providers.
You know, and that reminds me again, this conversation that was on our KUIS radio, they were talking about grants are great, but they don't last forever. That there needs to be, like you said, something specific and ongoing for rural development, rural economic development in Kansas with these various issues.
Grants are always going to have strings attached to them.
That-
And so it just depends what strings are attached.
Yeah, good point. We want to go to the phones once again. Again, a reminder that the toll-free number to call, 1-800-337-4788. Visiting with us now is Nick from Victoria. And Nick, you have a question of our legislators this evening.
Yes, I have a question about the bill regarding electric utility rates and trying to cap that. And I've been reading some various things about how that may not be a very good idea. I'd be interested to hear what the panel had to say about that bill. Thank you.
All right,
Well,
thank you, Nick.
I am on utilities.
Okay, let's hear from Elaine.
And we did hear this bill on a Wednesday or Thursday, I believe. In fact, we had proponents and opponents. And remember, a bill is just someone's idea. I like to say it's that simple. And is it a good idea or a bad idea? But someone proposes it, and then we're going to look at the pros and the cons. And in this case, the bill was directed at one energy company, and that's Evergy. And so it was directed at them with a cap on it. A very passionate testimony on both sides. In fact, it bled over to the other day for the opponents. I'm not certain. Monday is our last day to work that bill. I'm not certain if there is votes to get that out of committee, especially where it was directed at one utility. Seems to cause a lot of grief on this one too. But there again, it was someone's attempt to how can we keep our electric bills lower. And our surrounding states do have lower rates. So this was just one person's attempt at doing this. So I have to stay tuned on Monday to see if it passes out of committee.
You did say, you know, a bill is just somebody's idea. So did this generate because of the frigid temperatures that we had last February?
No, I believe it's just generally
Generally
Kansas is higher. And one group and then several business groups came on as well. And many different opponents to this one too. So Monday will be the last day we would work that bill. So if you'd like to pay attention to that, Nick, to see if it did even come out of committee.
It's kind of interesting though, because you got capitalism, because we want to be a capitalist society. You know, that capitalism is the way to go. You know, we all know it's kind of a mixed economy, but then you only have one or two energy companies, so they can kind of control the prices. So you get into the heart and soul of what United States is, or do we have a democracy, or you know, a representative democracy? Do we have capitalism? You know, what are we truly are? You know, and if we start putting caps on pricing, on how much a company can make, I think most people will look up that. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but isn't that socialism?
I'm not going to answer that. So we'll stay tuned, Elaine. You can let us know. All
Yes,
righty.
yes. So Monday would be the day at 2:30. We'll know if it had votes to get out of committee. And then a bill has a long ways to become a law. It has to be heard on the Senate floor, cross over into the House, have a hearing over there, have a vote on the House floor, and can be modified along the way in so many different ways. So many bills I've watched be watered down through the years. Here's the original idea, and it's nothing like it turned out the original form. Kind of like our fire tax bill in the beginning too. What a simple fix that we wanted became much bigger.
We have another caller on the line now from Norcator. Bob is with us. And Bob, you have a question this evening of our legislators?
Yes, I do. First, let me say that I've met all three of these individuals, and I want to thank them for their work on the legislative agenda. The question I have is what is happening with the sales tax on food?
Sales tax on food. That's been
Yes.
discussed before, whether we should get rid of it. And I know at least, I'm not sure if there isn't one, or at least it's lower in the surrounding states.
A lot of different ideas of that. I believe this came out as a big tax package that we haven't seen it run across the Senate floor yet. A lot of different talk, especially where some of our counties border Nebraska and then border Colorado too. And where Nebraska is 0, it's very popular along those border counties that Troy and I represent. There's been talk about ratcheting it down with revenues that come in, not take it down quickly, especially to 0, because our cities and counties also have their share. It would be optional if they would keep that. So I'm not sure. I think it's part of a big package on the Senate side. I'm not certain about the House. I have voted for this before as in amendment form, but so this is the first time it's gotten this far. And of course, the governor supports it, and so does the attorney general supports this idea.
What's it like in the House, Troy?
In the House, we haven't, I don't think we've kicked anything out of the tax committee in regards to the sales tax on food. There's been discussions of maybe not going all the way down to 0, but reducing it. So there'd be some tax relief when you're buying your groceries. But then also, it's been complicated because some have said, well, since you're talking about sales tax on food, does that include restaurants? Or is it just purchasing at a grocery store? And so the restaurant lobby has been wanting to be included in that. And so it's kind of ballooned into a much larger discussion than, again, fairly simple when it started out and was proposed by both the governor and the attorney general. But then other ideas percolate and get added and discussed.
John, what's your opinion on it?
Well, it's at 6.5%. Every time you take a 1% off, that's $70 million. So we're talking about $500 million that's going to be taken away. You know, I think we went through kind of a 100 to 0 mile an hour deal on income tax at one time, and it didn't work out so well for us. So I'm like Elaine, I'd rather we ratchet it down. We hit this level, we can take it down another bit. Our food tax is too high. We have the second highest in the country, and if you take all the exemptions out, we have the highest in the country. And it needs to be taken down. It needs to be taken down significantly, but you know, we can't, to 0 I think is unrealistic right now.
Significantly, gradually, and not all the way to 0.
Yeah, you know, I'd like to see, I think we'd cut it in half and be okay, personally, but you know, he's a tax dude.
Well, and that's kind of why the House is pausing and being cautious with this, because we don't want a future legislature, the position that we were in a few years ago, where we had, if the funds aren't there and there's not the surplus that we're experiencing right now, a future legislature may have to look at increasing the sales tax on food if we go all the way down to 0.
And he'll get fired.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, Senator Dahl is exactly right. $500 million would be coming out of the budget, and that is ongoing. That's every single year. And right now we're sitting with nearly a $4 billion ending surplus, but that's not going to last. I mean, the governor spends about $3 billion in her budget, and that includes her tax packages, which is about $1 billion. And so we have to be very careful. All three of us lived through those years where I always said it was creative accounting to balance the budget, because we have to constitutionally. And so we just have to be careful. Like, you know, I agree with Senator Dahl again. We have one of the highest sales tax on food in the nation. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that this is going to be an ongoing reduction. And we're not going to have this surplus in the budget forever.
That makes me think, did I not read this week somebody was talking about a sales tax holiday for
Yes.
back to school?
Mm-hmm.
What is that
That's
about?
kind of my bill, actually.
Oh, that's you. Well, tell us about
Well,
it.
I gave it to Virgil because he said, I gave it to Senator Peck because that's it. But it's 432 and it's a 4-day deal. Colorado does it, Oklahoma does it, Texas does it, which
Texas did.
Elkhart, where one of my cities go down to Amarillo, Missouri has it. So I wanted one that was longer and better. So they cap out like at however $1,000 or whatever. We don't have a cap out. And it's 4 days. Most of theirs are 3 days. And we have it's school supplies, but you got to be creative with that because we're talking about single family homes. So one single parent homes. So I wanted diapers in there, for example. So if you've got a creative mind, that's back to school because those kids are going to daycare. This mother's working. The school's going on. That 12, 13-year-old's taking care of that kid. So it's a 4-day deal, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. In August, no cap. They say it would cost $7.5 million, which, that sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but when you're talking about a budget of $6 billion, $7 billion, it's not that bad. And the relief it gets. The other thing I think it does, not only does it help the families, but our brick and mortar stores have taken a beating through COVID, and everybody's going online now. So hopefully this gives them a Black Friday in August. So these people, these brick and mortar stores can have their own sales or whatever. And I think this could be a big deal for a lot of our middle class, especially lower middle class. I think it could be a really big deal. So I'm excited about it. But the time it gets through, just like Elaine said, the time it gets through, it's going to look a lot different than what it looks like now.
Well, I'm excited too, John, that you put computers and computer programs in it as well. It's not just clothing and backpacks like we think, and shoes. It's much more broad. So I'm excited to see it, and it just did come out Thursday of the committee as well, so brand new.
How confident are you that this will be supported?
I think it'll be supported, but it's going to get changed. But I think because you got to understand where the people are. Johnson County carries a lot of weight, and Missouri having it. People are driving to Missouri to do it. And in Southeast, your Pittsburghs are doing it. All your border cities are doing it. But anytime you got Johnson County involved and you can get those legislators on board, heck, that's, you got to have 84, probably 60 of them from Johnson County. So, that's 63, you probably have 40.
About 40, I was going to say. There's
40
about
out of
legislators.
63 in Johnson County. And so, I think some sort of I'm confident that something will come out of it, but maybe not how we want it.
It's a good start.
Okay. I wanted to move to you, Elaine. First, though, a reminder, if you have a question or comment for our legislators this evening, be sure to give us a call. It's toll-free, 1-800-337-4788. Elaine, you and I were talking before the show got started about some things that you've been discussing that are against the law, and the penalties aren't that great. And
so
there need to be some concern there. Tell us
Sitting on
about this.
judiciary, it's an hour-and-a-half meeting. A lot of legal things go on, but sometimes these real-life problems pop up in there and how we deal with it. One, and I thought it was a funny name, smash and grab ATMs. So what and just in Hayes, where it's not usually one crime, it's someone steals a truck or a tractor, pulls the ATM out with a chain, takes the cash box and leaves a mess, and it costs our banks and credit unions and financial institutions hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's insurance claims with the money that was lost. So that's Senate Bill 43, if anyone wants to look at it, but it's not considered bank robbery right now, it's a misdemeanor. So that would be moving it to a felony. And then we were hearing from folks in the larger area about dressing room phone cameras that are being slipped underneath dressing rooms. And that is misdemeanor crime when they're caught. So it'd put some teeth in it where it'd be stiffer penalties and be a felony. And I think I just reach down there and take that phone myself if I saw that. So we had testimony not only from teenagers but older ladies too that had noticed this as well. So it's more in the larger stores that we're seeing. And the other one, porch pirates, is the nickname of this bill, and that's 408. And so if you think Amazon deliveries that are on our porches being stolen while we're at work, that's a misdemeanor, and this would become a felony charge as well. So 3 things that are really happening we're addressing in with a stiffer penalty to see if that curbs any. So kind of fascinating bills to watch and listen to the testimony in judiciary.
We'll see what happens.
Yes.
Troy, I wanted to ask you,
Yes.
you had meetings with the presidents of our universities to
Yes.
kind of get information from what they're thinking about. And of course, that includes Fort Hays State University and Dr. Tisa Mason, the president there. Specifically, Fort Hays State University, what does Dr. Mason have on her mind? What does she think?
Well, I had a meeting with her in my office this week, and then she joined us virtually, I would say due to the weather. So she joined us virtually in the meeting, as did the president of Pittsburgh State. But the other presidents and the chancellor of the University of Kansas were physically in the room. And we did this last year, where we had all the presidents of the 6 regent schools and also the president of Washburn University to just give us a status of where their university is at, what are they looking forward to in the future, what are some of the things that they might be having an ask for in regards to the budget. And it was a very, very popular meeting that we had in appropriations. And it went over very, very well with the committee members. And so I decided to have them back in again. It just, we happened to pick the day that we got 6 inches of snow in Topeka, and it made traveling a little difficult. But one of the biggest things that they're focusing on is the governor has put a $45 million request in the budget. And the Board of Regents is saying that if we receive that $45 million, we'll be able to keep tuition flat. And so all of the university presidents and the chancellor had stated that they're in support of the governor's initiative for the $45 million. But again, that's an ongoing expense. And I had a conversation with Chancellor Girard with the University of Kansas, because he was asking me about it. And I said, well, Doug, this is going to be $45 million this year and next year and the year after that, because you're saying this is going to keep tuition flat. Well, you can't just have it in one year and keep tuition flat for the subsequent years. And he nodded his head in agreement. The other thing that, there's some initiatives that Tisa Mason, President Mason, described to us in Fort Hays State. And one of those is cybersecurity. Fort Hays State is going to be taking an initiative with cybersecurity, so they're going to be asking the legislature for funds for that program.
So what do you mean by cybersecurity? For the university, or?
The university is going to be housing it with all their small business development centers throughout the state, working with small businesses, because the small businesses may not have the infrastructure in place with cybersecurity. And so Fort Hays State is going to be partnering with the small business development centers to help with those businesses.
That is the wave of the future.
It
I mean,
is.
it's already here, don't you think?
Well, and Fort Hays State has always been one of the universities that has always been looking very far into the future. I mean, they were the first with the virtual college in the state, and then they had the social work program that they started a couple years ago. So they're addressing needs not only just for Western Kansas and Central Kansas, but Kansas as a whole.
We have another caller on the line with us this evening. Again, a reminder, that toll-free number, 1-800-337-4788. Joining us now from Norton is Adam. And Adam, your question of the legislators this evening.
Good evening, and thank you for taking this call. Number one, I'm glad you have this show on for us people out in Western Kansas to see what our legislature is doing. I just understand that we don't have much money in the rainy day fund. I know we all gripe about taxes, but we all like the services them taxes provide, whether it's fire, police, ambulance, whatever. But one thing I would ask that you be very cautious in spending that money. I think you ought to put a B with $1 billion in the rainy day fund. The reason I say that We don't get any rain, and if you watch the weather, the long-range forecast, things ain't very plentiful from like Salina, Wichita, clear west to the border. We don't get any rain, we ain't going to have any crops. Farmers don't have any crops, towns don't have any economic development. We don't have any economic development, you're going to see more school buses hauling kids out of western Kansas to towns that can afford to house them, raise them, and educate them. Beware of our actions. Though we got money today, I haven't heard you all say that we're going to get another shot of money from the federal government later on. And we know that all costs us. That $30 trillion hanging over our heads got to be paid some way. I thank you for taking this call. I want to thank you for being here, letting us hear how things go on in Topeka. And just please think of the water. We all fight for water, even if it's just a glass to drink when we eat our lunch out, you know. That's very important. And without that, the bankers are going to be pulling their hair out, wondering how much they can spend. You might have to prop the bankers up to prop the towns up in order to keep some people out here, to keep the lights running. Thank you for your call, and thank you for the evening. Bye.
Thank you, Adam. Good points made there. Agriculture, huge, especially in Kansas, especially western and central Kansas. And we all have dealt with the consequences of drought in western Kansas. And as Adam said, it does look like at least the forecast for the long range, as much as you can trust that, it doesn't.
Years. It's just, we don't have a balance. It's a zero balance in the rainy day fund, or what's called the budget stabilization fund. We've set it up years ago, and we have never authorized the mechanism of putting money into it. 2 years ago, we did put a mechanism in the budget which transferred about $82 million into the budget stabilization fund, or the rainy day fund. And then the next year, Governor Kelly had it moved out of the rainy day fund into her budget, which I don't discredit her for that, because we didn't know where we were going to be standing budgetarily with COVID-19. And so right now it's sitting with a zero balance. And so, I mean, I agree with Adam. And that's one of my initiatives, and we've been discussing this with other House leadership. What amount do we want to put into the rainy day fund? So some of the things that we're looking at this year is putting about $500 million into the rainy day fund and then paying off debt. With this surplus that we have, let's position ourselves as you would your own personal finances and pay down debt, but put money away as well.
Senator Elaine, what do you think of that?
Totally agree with that. In my work life, we call that a reserve savings account. And I don't operate without one in business, and I don't in my personal life either. And it was always disappointing to me that government wasn't more business-like. That was one of my biggest surprises when I came 16 years ago. But this is how government has operated for many years. And paying down some debt, we have capers layering funds, so we can take the low-hanging fruit first, but then not go hog wild on cutting all the taxes that we would love to do. And we all have our own projects that we like, but yet be cautious of spending all the money that we have right now. I think it's very important that we do have our savings account, and I'm glad to know it had a name, Budget Stabilization Fund. We always just say rainy day fund.
And that's what it makes the budget committees, those individuals that serve on the budget committees, they always question why the Appropriations Committee changes some of the recommendations that they made to the Appropriations Committee. But Elaine was kind of alluding to that, that's why I was kind of jumping in, because they only look at a certain section of the departments and agencies in the state. The Appropriations Committee has to look at all of them and holistically look at the budget. And so we have to decide what we're going to fund and what we're not. And we have to balance the budget, and so some of those items that may be recommended by the Budget Committee, the Appropriations Committee will say, well, it's well-intentioned, but we're not going to fund that right now. And so some members on the Budget Committees always say, well, why do we even have Budget Committees? If they're just going to go and change it, why do we even have these meetings? Well, the reason is because they do the deliberations, they hear everything, and then the chairman reports that back to the Appropriations Committee. We ask them questions, and then we decide whether or not it's valid or whether we need to take it out. And that's what we have to do when we put the budget back together.
And John, what do you think about the?
Well, I want to take another part what Adam was talking about. If we had the technology in water now, I mean, back in the 60s that we have now, we wouldn't have a water problem, but we do have a water problem. We have lemons that have been developed. That's when farmers get together and share. You know, they all agree to use less inches of water. They found it might be more profitable. There's different things that we're doing with sprinkler systems like dragon lines and things like that to put on sprinklers to help save water, because we lose water when our water runs out. You know, we last guy out shut off the lights because we're done.
Well, and it's not just Kansas, Western Kansas, but it's a, you know, it's
Regional, right?
yeah, exactly. It's a natural resource that can be scarce worldwide.
And going back to Melissa's question, which was, you know, what are we hearing from our constituents? Well, last week they introduced the massive water bill. I believe Representative Smith was talking about that when he was on the show last week. And there are some farm organizations that are not in favor of that because it raises water fees in that bill. And so I've been hearing a lot from my constituents that they don't want me to vote for the water bill. But like we talked before, it'll change once it starts to get work.
Isn't it like 340 pages?
It's massive.
That's what I've heard.
Because he introduced it in appropriations because they didn't have it done in time.
You tell him, get out
And
of
so I had to carry that massive bill to the House clerk to have it read in.
You didn't
Almost
have
a
a
ream of
page do
paper.
that for you
No,
or anything?
no, I have to turn it in, and it was pretty thick.
And John might remember when we were talking about saving money, water, we would have lock boxes. But it was for the lawsuits with our water lawsuits against Nebraska and Colorado, a lock box. But I always joke that someone found the key. That lock box was supposed to be safe money for that purpose. So keys are made.
We want to return to the phones now, and this will be our last phone call of the evening. And Bob from Norcator has one more question that he would like to ask our legislators. Bob?
Yes, I would like to hear the legislators discuss our highway system and what funds are being made available to help improve our roads.
I guess Kansas has a reputation of having good roads.
We do.
Compared to many other states, but it takes money to build and maintain those. So how are we doing with our roads? John?
Well, last year we passed a massive bike program and I think we're rated like second in the country on highways.
There was one survey that actually had us as #1.
Yeah, so
impressive.
we're right there, and you know, we take a lot of pride in our highways, and we'll continue to do so because, you know, everything that we do, you know, it all takes transportation. So that's you know, hauling grain, whatever we're doing, it takes good roads, and so we've done a good job with that. We've failed in some areas, but I think we've done a heck of a good job with our roads.
Not to be negative, but where have we failed?
Well, there's always, you know,
That's
like
right.
you know, you don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but for example, several years ago, I was told by KDOT, if we would have had a blizzard, and then within 2 weeks had another blizzard, we would have not been able to clear off the highways because we had such a skeleton crew with KDOT people. And we're having a hard time filling KDOT positions because of lack of pay for them, and it takes personnel to do that. So if I had to say that our biggest weakness is that we don't pay our workers well enough, so we're short workers. And so when it comes to mowing the side of the roads, clearing the snow off, you know, we could be better than we are.
They do a good job.
They do a
even with
great
the
job,
skeleton crew.
but they put in a massive amount of time. They need help.
Absolutely.
KDOT's very responsive to us as legislators. If a constituent calls us with a bad bridge or a road that they've noticed, our districts do send people out right away when we alert it to the people, our legislative liaisons in Topeka. So they're very happy with how they interact with us, and the local cost share programs that they work with our cities and counties. So it's a teamwork together to get the best project.
Troy?
I was going to say, we had the Secretary of Transportation, Julie Lorenz, in Appropriations Committee give us a status of the Department of Transportation, and the governor has had presented in her budget what we call an extraordinary transfer that was going into the state general fund from the highway fund, and that will be stopping this year. So KDOT will be having more money than they had in the past, because there were times we were sweeping hundreds of millions of dollars out of that highway fund to balance the budget.
I remember that, yes. Well, we have reached the end of our time this evening. We want to give thanks to our legislators who work so hard and thank them for all that they do for us in Topeka. Again, joining us this evening, we've had the opportunity to talk with Representative Troy Waymaster from Bunker Hill. Also joining us, Senator Elaine Bowers from Concordia and Senator John Dahl from Garden City. Again, thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. I am your moderator, Kansas Legislature Becky Kaiser. Thanks for joining us.
In our increasingly electrified society, that's where a resilient grid matters most. ITC Great Plains is ensuring the greater grid can meet our energy needs now and long into the future. Learn more at itc-holdings.com.